Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, and hello everybody, and welcome to my show, Sunday Night Live, with me, Jonny at JonnyLipshamStudios.co.uk. Yes, we have had the most spectacular and incredible storms here the last couple of days. The best of it was yesterday. But we still have incredibly heavy rain and a few rumbles of thunder and a bit of lightning. But for the most part, it has just been yesterday, really. Yesterday, the sky it had been beautiful. It had been a gorgeous day right up until kind of like early afternoon. And then suddenly the sky that had been completely blue filled in with incredibly huge, ominous dark black clouds. And then what happened next for the next 13 hours was we had about 6 months worth of rain in the space of that time, which meant we had spectacular thunder and lightning and flooded roads. And I was with my wife and kids over at my parents' place across the river in a little town called Burnt Island in the Kingdom of Fife, which is just across the river from us. It's still in Scotland, but bizarrely it's called the Kingdom of Fife. I don't know, it's very old history, which I won't bore you with. But anyway, so we were there and had been there for the day. And so when it came time to go home, we basically caught a break between two massive storm cells that were coming in one after the other, and we caught a little break, and so off we went, and we encountered horrendous amounts of flooding. And at one point we went through water that was coming over the bonnet of the car, and somehow we managed to get through that and through to the other side and onto the and onto the road again so that we could carry on. Until we got home. Took us a while to get home, but we got home. But really, the rain was phenomenal. It was like a monsoon. It was incredible. I have never in my entire life seen rain like that here in Scotland, and thunder quite like it in my entire life. It was amazing. But we are still on yellow alerts for torrential rain and flash flooding. So it's been pretty amazing here, and I don't know how long this show is going to be able to go on for, to be honest. So we're basically going to take it as it comes, and if the stream goes down, it probably will not come back again, because the internet will basically have gone down. It's gone down a couple of times already today, so I am hoping that we will get at least half an hour in. So we're basically, because of the conditions, I'm thinking that we just basically go for just a Q&A tonight. Normally I'd have something planned that we can talk about and that we can demonstrate in Studio One, but don't have that luxury with the weather and also with the fact that this stream could go down at any minute. So let's get straight into your questions, folks. It's good to see actually loads of people here already. Let's see. Martin says, was beginning to wonder if there was ever going to be a live stream. Well, yeah, I mean, I did put out adverts earlier on this afternoon, letting everyone know that there was going to be a show. So, And that was more kind of like, I hoped that we'd be able to do a show. But I am here. And to be honest, yesterday I didn't even think we were going to be able to get home and that we weren't going to have to sleep in a half-sunken car in the middle of a flooded road. That's kind of where things were last night. So, but we're fine. One of the highlights of this morning, really, for me, was one of my friends sent me a video of water pouring through the roof of a supermarket down in town, and people were like there trying to shop, and they couldn't because it was like a waterfall cascading through the roof of the store. And they basically had to evacuate everybody and close the store because the roof could have collapsed. And so, yeah, it was pretty spectacular. Lollipop Gill says, would you be willing to share your interpretation on the colours of different keys? What sort of overall emotion they communicate, which you would choose for which? That is a great question. It's actually that's a great question, but it's actually a really quite complicated one because not everybody is going to perceive the color of music in the same way. In much the same way that some people will look at a piece of, I don't know, let's say a Monet work, and they will adore it, but then they'll look at a Matisse next and they'll hate it. And then they'll look at a Picasso and they'll just not understand it at all. So, because we interpret things very, very differently, I might say, hey, the key of B flat sounds orange to me. And warm and lush. And is probably great for writing, a love song or something like that. Or a nice, a narrative ballad. Would be, it would be ideal for that. But somebody else might go, no, it sounds very, kind of dark green and maybe a little bit sad, and a little too poignant for something romantic. So, it's quite broad and quite open to different people's interpretation and how they hear things, how they perceive things. I'm unique because I don't see color at all. My world is kind of a sepia world. I think that's how my optician describes how I would probably perceive color, according to my color blindness tests. And he said, yeah, that's probably a world, isn't it? And I said, yeah, probably. Hard to describe what my world looks like, but if I was to describe it, that's probably the best that we could come up with. My world looks like an old 19th century photograph. So I don't see color at all. Now, the brain being a very, very clever thing that it is, the brain always compensates. For example, if you lose your sight, then your sense of hearing will take over and will become heightened so that you can hear reflections off surfaces in much the same way that a dolphin does, or a bat. And, you're able to navigate your way around and know what kind of a size room you're in and how populated it is and that kind of stuff. And so your ears begin to fill in the blanks that your eyes don't perceive because you've become blind. And so for me, because I don't see color, my brain therefore fills in the blanks for me by enabling me to hear color. I know it sounds weird and it sounds bizarre, but that's how it works for me. So, when I see my eyes behold lots of color, for me, my ears just go crazy because I can hear all these colors. And so, different colors have a different kind of sound to me. Like, I would describe maybe a deep maroon red as maybe, I don't know, cor anglais and bassoons voiced close together in their chalumeau register, so in their lowest register. So that's how my brain works. It's weird. I know. Everybody in my family thinks I am weird, and that's okay. I'm happy with that. So I hope that that kind of answers your question at least a little bit. It's hard to demonstrate. You know, I could play a B flat major chord on the piano here, and, you know, all of you that are here in the chat are in the show are going to interpret that and think of that in terms of different colors, just because of who we are. It is the way we are wired, I suppose. Let's see. Michael Johnson says, didn't get any adverts today, only saw when you went live. Well, I posted adverts up all over the place, all over the Presonus groups in Facebook land. So if you are in the Home Studio Trainer support group, if you're in Presonus Studio One, if you're in the mixing and mastering tutorials group, if you're in Studio One sessions, I put them all up there. So if you're in any of those groups, you will have seen them, and the ones that I moderate, I have marked those as an announcement, so they will be at the top in the announcements section. That's kind of where I do that, and Michael, you are quite correct. Synesthesia, that is exactly the condition. Well done. Let's see. Greg says, what's the best way to go about blending vocal harmonies? Oh, good question. Vocal harmonies, that's a great question. Now, to get really, really great sounding vocal harmonies, it depends upon a couple of things. Number one, the style of music that you're going for. And that will help dictate the style of harmonic writing that you do. And it's also got to be singable. Now, if you've ever been involved in any choral music whatsoever, any choir music, you've either been in a choir or you've directed a choir or you've written arrangements for a choir, if you've done anything remotely connected to that, you will know that the best movement for a human voice is stepwise or logical leaps. So most people can you know, do a stepwise motion. You know, most people can sing something like that, which is very hymn-like, which is why a lot of hymns have stepwise motion in them. And some of them will have a little bit of a leap, so, you know, like a fifth. Like, I'm trying to think of leaping melodies now. I don't know why, because it's not really related, but it kind of is. Like something like Somewhere Over the Rainbow. It features an octave leap to start with. And then the melody basically progresses down, but it has a logical leap all the way through it. And then you have this leap of a sixth. I'm not used to playing in G. And so on and so forth. So people can do leaps, but they have to be logical leaps, like a sixth. Most people can sing a fifth, or a sixth, or a third, or a fourth. Most people can sing those kind of intervals. Not everybody can sing things like a major seventh, or a augmented fourth. Like, for example, the love song Maria from Leonard Bernstein's West Side Story features this interval. And the reason I think he chose that interval is because he wants to get at not only the fact that the emotion or the love emotion that is very present in the song, Maria, I just met a girl named Maria and she's wonderful and everything else, but also as possibly as a portent to what is yet to come, because, you know, that's kind of a bit of a dark interval. I mean, it does resolve up to the fifth, granted, but you know, it kind of goes. So you got that tension that is all the way through that song. So how am I relating this to harmony? how the melody is written will help you dictate how your harmonies are going to go and the style of music. So if you're doing something that's, heavy rock orientated, you're not going to be writing barbershop style harmonies. So pretty much standard harmony writing would be sopranos at the top, or your highest voice, next highest. So you have like soprano, alto, tenor, bass. And that's kind of like the standard fare for harmony writing, 4 parts. And one of those will maybe carry the melody, and the others will harmonize that or provide a counter melody as well. So you can do both. You can do melody and counter melody as well as harmony, and that's where we get into, if you've ever listened to any Bach choral work, you will hear lots of counter melodies going on. So that's kind of how it works. Now, you can have wide open voicings where all the intervals are wide apart. Like, for example, that's kind of an open voicing. It's bright, but you can also have closed voicing as well, where everything is close up together. So you got, soprano, alto, tenor, bass, and the alto, tenor, bass are like a tone apart. And so, you're getting kind of into barbershop kind of harmony there, or doo-wop style harmony. You're getting into that style of harmony writing at that point. So another thing to consider is also the people that are going to be singing the parts that you've written. Do their voices go well together? You have to think about that. You have to think about the tonal qualities of each of your singers as well, to achieve a good blend. So, which is why, when producers are looking to hire backing vocalists for a particular band, they will work with the composers, the songwriters, as to, kind of the sound that they're looking for, what's going to go best with their voice, with the lead singer's voice. So those are things to definitely consider and bear in mind. So I hope that helps. It was kind of a bit of a long-winded answer, and I'm sorry about that, but it was a great question. And I hope that I've done it justice. I'm going to go up a little bit. So Greg, I hope that answers your question. Martin says, don't certain key signatures just naturally lend themselves to specific moods? Thought I'd read somewhere that it has to do with frequencies. Yeah, you may well be right. There is definitely that aspect to it. It's more to do with the harmonic series than it is to do with frequencies, although the harmonic series and frequencies are inextricably linked because it's sound, it's audio. Every sound has a frequency response, whether that's the sound of a hippo farting or a gunshot. They all have a particular frequency response. Let's see. Lollipop says, would it be easier if we switched out the word color for mood or tone? Maybe. Definitely different keys. Maybe to some people would have a different mood or a different tone to them. Like for some people, the key of E flat. Let's go to a piano actually. For some people, the key of E flat has a very stately sound. Some people think, the key of E flat has a nice, stately, authoritative, commanding tone to it. And some people would say that maybe B flat is great for hymns. Kind of is if you're talking about hymns that were written primarily for organ playing and congregational singing. B flat's not too bad, although it can get a little bit screechy if the range of the song is big. If the range of the song is more than a major sixth, then hymn writing will not be that great in the key of B flat, because it can get a little screechy. But it does kind of work. It's also great for ballads, actually, the key of B flat, which is why I think there's a Louis Armstrong song that is in my head, and I can't think of the title of it. What's it called? It's not What a Wonderful World, so don't type that in the chat because that's not the answer. It was one of the last things he ever recorded, if not the last thing he actually recorded before he died. We Have All the Time in the World. That's the one. That's in the key of B flat. And it's a great tune, and it's one of the last things he ever played on trumpet, actually, as well. So, yes, moods. Deer Creek says, does the key of G flat sound different than F sharp? Enharmonically, it is different, but otherwise it isn't, really. I don't think, anyway. I mean, here's the key of F sharp. I'm now going to change to the key of G flat. No, it doesn't really sound different, does it? It's just enharmonics. For some instruments, writing in flat keys is better than writing in sharp keys. Because it's easier to play in flat keys than it is to play sharp keys for some instruments. And the other thing is that it's about transposition as well. Like transposing instruments like French horns, or trumpets, trombones, clarinets, bassoons, baritone horn, tenor horn, tuba. These are all transposing instruments, and so when you're choosing the key for your piece of music, you have to bear in mind the orchestration of your piece. So if you're writing for brass band, writing in flat keys is a good idea, because it means they don't have to read quite so many accidentals, for the most part, because most instruments in the brass band are in flat keys, like, trombones are in B flat. Cornets are in B flat predominantly, unless it's a soprano, in which case that's in E flat. Alto horns are in E flat, tenor horns are in B flat, and then you have basses, which are in E flat or B flat. So they're mostly in B flat or E flat. So if you're writing in flat keys, it's good because there are not so many accidentals to read. But, so yeah. But for things like saxophone, playing in sharp keys is a little easier than playing in flat keys. So I hope that answers that, Deer Creek. Kyle is here. He says, watch the science video which basically stated that since everyone's brain and brain chemistry and lived experiences are different, then everyone's perception of the world around is completely different. Yes, we certainly do have some biases based on our a prioris. There's another good Latin phrase for you. And our predispositions, and the way we've been conditioned as we've grown up. Everybody is influenced by the first people that are in their lives. So when you are born, your first influence, by and large, is going to be your mum and dad and other close relatives. They are going to be the first people to influence your thinking and shape your first understood cognitive responses. So immediately, that's your initial influence, and then of course that sphere of influence widens as as you grow cognitively, you start to take in other influences, like the television. If you hear and watch the television, those kind of sights and sounds are going to start to help shape your thinking, music that you listen to, whatever is on the radio. So yeah, I think that's a very valid point. Mike from Peace Valley Audio says, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, etc. Yes. My favourite subject is modes, by the way. I am working my way down the chat, folks, so bear with me. D. Wayne is here, but he says he has to go. I'm sorry about that. I hope you have a good day, whatever you're doing. Michael Johnson says, Minuet in G has a little both. Uh-huh. Deer Creek says, A minor based mode for starters may be a good choice. Ionian versus Ionian or mixed Lydian. Yeah, although to be honest, before I got to Aeolian, which is the minor key that we talk about, before I got to that mode, which would be... Before I got to that, I really, to be honest, Dorian mode was just far more easy. Sorry, Aeolian would be where you've got the natural 6 rather than the raised 6, which is what I played, which would be a Dorian mode. So that's Aeolian mode, and then Dorian. Yeah, Dorian mode and mixed Lydian modes were really the modes that I learned the most because they're the most prevalent in most jazz music of all the modes. But that's not to say that I wouldn't use things like Locrian and Lydian. I use Lydian on major 7 chords quite a lot. But I also would use the dominant version, which would be Lydian dominant. I would use that on 7th chords and other dominant chords as well. I like using that sharp 11. Let's see. Lollipop Sir is talking to Martin. Let's go down a bit further. Oh, I'm going the wrong way. And we're down at the bottom, I think. Yes, we're down at the bottom. Hooray! Let's see. Deer Creek says, don't ask me why, but I tend to think keys with sharps in them. For example, would be G A E would be brighter and happier versus something like E flat minor. But the natural G in E flat may sound happy. Okay. A lot of guitar players think in sharp keys, and violinists think in sharp keys because they are easier to play on those instruments, which is why, most blues music that you hear from a lot of guitar players, especially when they are, just getting into guitar playing, they'll play a blues in E, which is great for guitar. Not so great for trumpet because, if your guitar player is chugging away on a blues in E, and then your next door neighbor who's a really, really good trumpet player comes in, and immediately he's going to have to play a blues in F sharp. That's like 6 sharps. That's hard work to play because you're constantly having to play unusual fingerings on the trumpet to get those blue notes coming out. So, yeah. Would have been here sooner, says Snidely. Snidely's here. Good to see you. Welcome. Would have been here sooner, but I had to take a nap after church. You know what? I have to do that as well, regularly after church, especially if I've been either preaching or if I have been on ministry team or if I've been playing bass or something. Yes, I regularly have to take a little bit of a snooze. Let's see. G flat and E flat minor might take you elsewhere. Probably not, because the G flat is the correct third in E flat minor. whereas G in E flat, G natural in E flat minor. So, I mean, if you're going to juxtapose. Yeah, that just sounds weird. Yeah, the G flat is much better in E flat minor. Lollipop says only JL can fit a hippo fart and gunshot into the same sentence. Absolutely. It is my unique sense of humor. E flat, B flat associated with brass instruments. Yes, most brass instruments are in E flat or B flat, although there are exceptions. French horn is in F. Yeah. Trying to think, is there anything else? Oh yeah, soprano trumpet would be in C. Trying to think, is there any other brass instruments that are in weird keys? Can't think of any at the moment. Also, reed instruments tend to be in flat keys, like alto sax, tenor sax. Alto sax is in E flat. Baritone sax is also in E flat. Tenor sax is in B flat. Soprano sax is in B flat. And sopranino saxophone, which is tiddly tiny, even higher pitched than soprano, which would probably blow Kenny G's ear holes out if you played it, is in C. I don't know what key Let It Be was written in. I think it was written in F, but I could be wrong. Oh, there you go. Ken says Let It Be is in C major. How did they get it to sound minor? Oh, it's because it does have some minor chords in it. It has gosh, it's been years since I played it. Yeah, it's been years since I played it, but it does have some minor chords in it. And it's a case of the minor chords are exactly the right points, at exactly the right time in the lyric to kind of give it that kind of tinge of darkness about it, I would say. Paul Lucas is here. He says, how do you determine whether or not to keep a song with simple instrumentation, say guitar or piano and a vocal, or go with much more full instrumentation? Great question, because that is a production and arranging question. That's really good. So, do I keep my song simple? Or do I fill it out with a full rhythm section, an orchestra, a brass band, a choir, and a horn section, a big band or something? I mean, with like 200 people. It kind of depends. It depends upon the lyric, I think. If your lyric is big and sweeping and broad and lots of big, large subjects and big statements, then maybe having a bigger, fuller sound is going to work with that. I got a really itchy nose. Sorry, folks. Whereas if your song has really intimate and very detailed imagery, then maybe having a smaller arrangement is the way to go. Now, quite often, a song may start small in its arrangement and then get bigger as you get towards the chorus, and then the fullest, maybe the first chord is like, I don't know, 3/4 of the full instrumentation that you have for the song. And then by the time you get to your final chorus, everybody is in. Every instrument that you have written, you've arranged for the song, they are all in on that final chorus. So you can do that. You can start small. You can start with an acoustic guitar and a vocal for the first verse, and then maybe the first chorus, or maybe if you have like back-to-back verses, maybe verse 2, you bring in the bass and the drums a little bit lightly, just to give a little bit of extra forward motion and just to expand things just a little bit, but it's still fairly contained. And then your first chorus, again, still fairly contained, but maybe you add a couple of little elements into the chorus, and then they drop out, and then everything goes back small again, but you've still got the bass and the drums there, and maybe the volume is just a little bit up for the third verse. And then you go into your middle section, on out into maybe your guitar solo section. You want everything to be nice and big for that moment. So that the guitar has or sax solo, whichever it is, has its, has all of this space and all of this room, and all of this support underneath it, this foundation underneath it. And then maybe the first, you bring everything down to back just to the acoustic guitar and the vocal for maybe the first half of your final chorus. And then bang, you expand everything back out again. And that's how you keep the listener's ears totally engaged throughout the whole song, is by bringing elements in, taking elements out. But as to whether you do the song just as the vocal and the guitar, a good example of a small arrangement would be Cyndi Lauper's Time After Time. I mean, that's a really, really beautiful song, and it's very, very intimate. Before you listen to the song, go and look up the lyrics and read through the lyrics. Don't even listen to the music whilst you're reading through. Just do a cold read through of the lyrics. And then think about how you would go about setting that song to music, what you would do. And then listen to her original recording. And compare what you would have done with what she actually did in that recording and the production that was done for that. And then you can, of course, compare that to the Miles Davis cover as well. Because I think Miles Davis's version captures it very, very, very well. And he captures the emotion and the intimacy of the lyric, albeit he's playing it on a trumpet. But he's using a Harman mute in the bell of the trumpet, which takes the big, wide, fat sound of the trumpet and makes it very, very brittle and narrow and thin, deliberately, so that you are bringing out a different tone of the instrument and you're holding back others inside the mute. And it's very, very effective. So those are things to consider. Snidely says, forget the hymns, sing a new song to the Lord. Well, you know what? We wouldn't have new songs if there weren't any hymns, because the hymns laid down the foundation for whatever we do now. Let's see. Let's go down again, because I think you guys have been commenting and I've been chatting away and missing it. Mine says, I've never been able to wrap my head around notation, but I could hear and understand why it was so important. Well, here's the thing with notation. Notation basically tells other musicians how to play your music and how to play it the way you want it to be heard. So that's what notation does. It's instructions to your musicians to play your song the way you intend it and the way you want it to be heard. You could write 4 or 5 pages of text telling the musicians how to play the tune. But you know what? It's a lot quicker to have notation, musical notation, because that gets the musicians to your end result a lot quicker, and there's less room for error, and there's less room for misunderstanding and misinterpretation. So music theory, notation, all of those things are really important. It's the language of music. Yes, you can understand the language of music orally, in the same way that you learn to speak. You learn to speak from listening to your parents predominantly, and other speech that you hear. And then you gradually begin to learn how to make those sounds, and then those sounds turn into words, and then those words turn into sentences, and before you know it, you are fully fledged and able to hold a complete conversation with somebody for 6 hours. So, that's how we learn how to communicate with other people. So it is the same way with music. Yes, you can receive it orally, and you can pass it on orally by your performance. Absolutely you can. But if you want other people involved, you need them to understand your song, and you need them to understand your song as clearly as possible and as quickly as possible, so that you can get to the correct performance as quickly as possible. And that's where notation comes in. And that's where notation is extremely useful and extremely handy. Especially if somebody hires you and says, hey, I love the way you play. I love the sound you get out of your bass or out of your guitar or out of your trumpet. I'd really like your sound on my record. And they go, oh, great, yeah, absolutely. And then they turn up to the session. What do you want me to play? Well, you've got a choice now. How do you answer that question? You've got a choice. You either sit and talk to them about how they're going to play it, or you sing the part to them. I've done that. I've done that with musicians. I did a whole piece for a 15-piece mixed ensemble, mixed classical music and mixed classical instruments and jazz instruments. And I hadn't written a chart for it. It was all in my head. I hadn't written anything down. But because it was all worked out in my head, I knew how each musician, how I wanted them to play their parts. So I sang their parts to them with a backing track. And so that's how they learned my piece. They didn't play it with any written music. Would it have been quicker to have written a chart? Yeah, probably it would have. It would have, I probably would have got to the recording phase a lot quicker had I written a chart. I just didn't. Because I wanted to challenge myself and see, hey, can I actually communicate this another way to a bunch of musicians and get it understood and get it disseminated and then get it recorded in a way that is going to work? The answer was yes, I could. But had I written a chart, it probably would have gone down in half the time, at least. So for the most part these days, if I want somebody to play something very, specific, that I want them to contribute a specific part to my music, I write a chart. Even if it's a particular drummer and I want them to play on my song, yes, I could say, hey, just play the kind of groove that you feel listening to the backing track, and put the fills in where you professionally think is appropriate. If they're really, really, really good, like Vinnie Colaiuta style good, then yeah, I might well do that. I might well say, hey, have a couple of playthroughs and just jam along to the track, and then we'll go and do a take. I might do that. But if the piece is quite complex and there's lots of different things going on, and I'm wanting the drummer to accent and emphasize, horn section parts or whatever, I need to write those out so that whomever that drummer is, knows when to play those phrases and how I want those phrases played. So yes, I write drum charts as well. So that's the beauty of notation. Let's see. Deer Creek says, most brass players I've heard that were extremely good relied on muscle memory, and it didn't really matter what key they played in. They were past thinking about scales and correct notes. Well, yes, it may well be muscle memory, and they may well be able to transpose on the fly, but it's still always helpful to know what key you're in. Now, if you understand your instrument really, really well, then, you know, when the guitar player says, hey, let's do a blues in G, and you're the trumpet player, you instinctively go, okay, I'm in A. And you play your blues phrases in A. If you've got the phraseology, then that's all you need to know. You know, the concert key is G, therefore the trumpet's going to be in A. The alto sax player is going to be in E. You know, yeah, that's exactly how it does work. But if you're going to write a specific part out for the trumpet player to play, a specific phrase, or, you've got a horn section, you want them to play specific voicings, yeah, you're going to have to transpose. You are. There's no getting away from it, no getting around it. You're going to have to transpose. And put the notes in the correct register for the instrument. So it's not just about going, oh, the trumpet is a tone above concert, and an alto sax, you could say it's a minor third lower, but it isn't. You have to write a major sixth above concert pitch for an alto sax. So, you'll say, okay, I want you to play this C. That's the note I want to come out of your sax. And they'll say, okay, that's fine. And they will finger on their alto sax that note. But what comes out of the instrument, because of the design of it and the shape of it, is that note. Okay? That's essentially, fundamentally, a tiny little bit of how transposing works and why it's really, really important. And it's not just about how great the player is. If you've got a really, really great player who is very, very adept at transposing on the fly, you don't really have too much of a problem until you're wanting very, very specific phrases, in which case, yes, you're going to have to write those down. The Tower of Power horn section is probably the best horn section in the world. They are phenomenal musicians and are able, they're totally able to play some of the most complex phrases and patterns that you have ever heard, right? How do they play them? It's all written down. It's all written down and correctly transposed so that they're playing the correct notes in the correct register on their instrument. That's how it works. But yes, I do take your point. Never even heard of a figured bass line. I have. Anytime I've ever played Bach, I've had to play a figured bass, or Haydn even. Early Haydn music, you would be playing figured bass parts. What is a figured bass part? You're probably wondering. Well, it's essentially the Baroque version of writing chord symbols over a bass part, so that a piano player can improvise a piano part, that's essentially what the figured bass part, the figured bass thing is. Basically, you're reading off a cello part as the keyboard player on a harpsichord, generally speaking, and there are numbers written underneath the notes of the cello part, and those numbers denote the intervals above that bass note that the harpsichord player needs to play to make the right chord to fit everybody else's parts. Now, he can improvise rhythmically, kind of like you would with a set of chord symbols, for a strummed guitar part or something like that. You know, you'd see on the sheet of music, you know, 2 bars of C. Great, okay. What's the bass doing? The bass is doing this. Well, what can the keyboard player do? Well, the keyboard player will be playing something like this. You know, in a more popular setting, in a more Baroque era setting, you know, it would be much more, you know, it'd be much more, you know, there'd be turns and mordants and trills and all sorts that you have to play. I'm not classically trained, so I don't play those kind of things. But that's how figured bass works, fundamentally. So there you go. We're getting towards the end of the show here, folks. And my chat has frozen. Martin is away, so Martin probably missed my entire answer there. Johnny Guyver's in the room. Good to see you, buddy. Thank you for coming. Martin says your storms have made it to Florida. Thunder and lightning, lights are flickering. Okay, that's why you gotta go. Okay, no problem, dude. Let's see, what else do we have? What else do we have? Any other questions, folks? Before I wrap up this show in about 6 minutes' time. But we had some great kind of questions on notation and stuff like that there, which has been awesome. I love those kind of questions. They're really great. And you guys got me talking about Bach and figured bass and stuff like that I've not really thought about for years. Not since I was at university doing my doing composition. Doing my composition degree. And learning how to write those kind of things. Yes, I had to learn how to write those things. You know, I'm a jazz player. I'm a jazz musician. I write jazz arrangements. I write for big bands and that kind of stuff. But, you know, when I was at university doing my composing and arranging degree, I had to learn how to write for, you know, Baroque groups with recorders and harpsichord and cello, you know, that kind of stuff. And, you know, violin and that kind of stuff. I had to learn how to write for that kind of setting and do it authentically, which was a heck of a challenge, I might add, but really good fun. Michael says, is there a good transient shaper that can help sharpen up a drum track? I need to get popping through the mix better. Yes, I can thoroughly recommend one. If you just give me a second, I'm going to go and get Studio One going and I can show you one. So let me show you the one that I have. And that's the wrong button entirely. That is the button I went to do. So I can show you. Didn't want to press that button either. Down here in my, where is it? No, it's not down there. Is it up here? Aha. My plugin alliance folder. I have this guy, the SPL Attacker, which is very, very cool. Let me just get this in place and I'll show you what it's like. So let's slap this on drums. And this is what it looks like. It's really, really simple to use. You have an attack knob and you have an output gain, so you can balance your input and your output. And then you just kind of, you A-B it with the bypass button. until you're getting the attack that you want, the extra attack that you want. But you are also making sure that it's balanced so that it's not kind of louder than it should be. But this is really, really good. And it's actually very reasonably priced. If you go over to the Plugin Alliance website, you should see this guy. And it's certainly, when I got it, it was really cheap. I don't know whether it still is. I think I got it for $20. But if you've got a PreSonus interface or one of the PreSonus mixers, you should have the Studio Magic bundle. And if you do, I believe this guy is included in it. I think that's right. But I bought this before that bundle came into being. So you guys can now, if you have a PreSonus mixer or a PreSonus interface, you can get this for free. You lucky people. So yeah, this is definitely worth having. It does great for drums, for adding some extra attack and some extra punch. But you can, if you've got a slap bass part as well, bung it on there as well. Anything that's like really percussive that you want to add a little bit of extra transient to, this is good. They have got a proper transient designer in there as well, the Plugin Alliance guys, which you could get. It's a little more expensive, but it's pretty good. They're all pretty good. Plugin Alliance plugins are excellent. Well worth getting. Oh, good grief, we got some donations. Ken Moss with $10 and says, "Thank you, JL, for all that you do." Ken, you are extremely welcome, my friend. Let's see. And Johnny Gibe with $20 as well. And he says, "Awesome as usual." Well, that's extremely cool of you to say so, my friend. Thank you. My computer is behaving itself at the moment. And so is the storm. I don't know if you can hear it in the mic, but it is rumbling about out there. And at the moment, the rain is lashing against my windows. My expander gate thing might be stopping you hearing it. But yeah, I can hear it. It's actually really quite loud against the windows. So we've only got 1 minute to go. We've managed to make it through the whole hour, but I can hear it getting pretty wild outside. So we will end in exactly 45 seconds time. Johnny Gibe says, "Here is the Bittersweet Transient plugin, which is free." Well, that's awesome. I like that one as well. Tori Gray is here. He says, "I've been really impressed with the Boz Digital's Transgressor plugin." Yeah, I like that too. I don't have it, but a friend of mine who is a Pro Tools guy who manages a studio in town, the other side of town, where I go, and I work with him quite a lot. I go and do sessions over there. I play bass and keyboards and stuff, and I do some vocal tracks for him as well. Sometimes I go to his studio. He's a Pro Tools guy. He has a bunch of those kind of plugins as well that I don't have. But yeah, I've gone and done tracks for film scores and things over in his studio. He has a very big studio, should we say? It's one of the biggest studios in this part of Scotland. Let's see. Dickory says, "My 1903 Windows update was painless." Yes, I did my wife's computer as well. For her 1903. Now, she doesn't have any music production software or anything like that, but I did go through and check all the settings and for audio and everything else, and everything was fine. It was really painless. It took a couple of hours, and I just left it doing its thing, and then I went back, and it was just like there was a nice little pretty welcome screen from Windows saying, "Welcome to Windows latest update," and all of that. And it asked me if I wanted to use Microsoft Edge instead of Chrome. I don't know how good Microsoft Edge is. I know nothing about it because I'm a Windows 7 guy in my studio. So But I am aware that Windows 7 is going EOL in January. So I will be upgrading. I will be going up to Windows 10 Professional. It's just a matter of time when I'm going to do it than anything else. Than when I actually do it. But that's really encouraging for me. You know, I've stayed away from Windows 10 because, you know, so many of you guys have told me horrific stories about Windows just spontaneously going, I'm updating. And whilst I'm doing it, I'm going to ruin all of your audio settings, and it's going to take you 6 hours to get it all back. I've heard too many of those kind of stories from too many sources. You know, I'm not the kind of guy that goes, oh, there's, you know, 4 or 5 people that said this is bad, so I'm going to stay away from it. No, you know, I have heard dozens, literally dozens of stories about Windows updates that have either completely wrecked their computer or it's completely wrecked their door. And so I've stayed away from Windows 10 for as long as I possibly can. But, you know, I'm aware that, you know, with Windows 7 going EOL, it's probably, you know, as good a time as any to start thinking about going up to Windows 10. So, and I've checked with the manufacturer of my computer, and they said it's all, you know, everything in there, all the hardware and everything else is Windows 10 ready. So it's just a case of getting it and doing it. Yeah, Deer Creek, that was my experience with my wife's computer as well. It rebooted several times, 30 minutes to download, but about 2 hours to install. Yeah, that was about it. Okay. Tori says, Microsoft actually listened to a lot of us and have included a feature that allows us to choose whether automatic updates happen or not. Yes. Yes, I have heard that too, which is I'm particularly pleased about that. Hey, I forgot to switch over to this screen. I don't want to call it the lounge because Johnny, that's your prerogative. You've got a lounge. I really don't, you know. This is just me, I suppose. Can I call this the me view, or is that too narcissistic? I don't know. Anyway, we are 4 minutes over. And I can really hear the rain lashing down now. So I think it's probably about time that we called it a night. So I want to say a big thank you to everybody for coming and hanging out on this Q&A session. And somehow we made it through the hour without mishap, which is amazing. I ought to check how many people we've had in the room tonight before we go. Oh, crikey, we've had about 20 or 21 people, which is awesome. That's very, very cool. So thank you everybody for coming. It's been epic, and you guys have, as usual, asked some of the best questions ever, especially some of the questions about figured bass and blending vocal harmonies and stuff like that. Those are really, really great questions. I love it when you guys ask really, really fantastic questions like that and get me stretched and having to dig deep in my memory to find information to be able to give you to answer those kind of questions. So I love it when you guys challenge me. So please do your best on my show to challenge me. I like it. Johnny says I had 27 at one point. Wow, that's really good. That is really good. Not quite a record, but yeah. Dick says, straighten your bass gig bag next for the next show. My OCD is killing me. Yeah, it. You know what? When I came back in from my last gig, and I put the case back in there, it was standing up. And I guess at some point it must have just fallen over. But yeah, if it helps you out, Chris, I will straighten it for the next show, okay? But thanks, everybody, and I'm going to go and watch the thunderstorms upstairs in the kids' room. They have the attic room, and they've got the skylights, and I can just open the skylights and watch it. And it's usually, certainly if last night is anything to go by, pretty epic. So thanks, everybody, and I will see you on Wednesday over on Jonny's channel for Songwriting Simplified. It's going to be awesome. Good night, everybody. Good night.